It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I have heard of the one where we did not actually go to the moon, where it was all filmed and it didn't happen.
No, dadgummit.
Jack Schmidt having a few problems.
Welcome everyone to the Preternatural Truth Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Arne, along with Mick Harrison and Cory Pressler. Well, what a fascinating show we have for you tonight with our very special guest, Bart Sibrel. Bart is the author of the book called Moon Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list. Tonight we'll be deciphering fact from fiction and peeling back the layers to reveal more about this controversial topic. Was the NASA moon landing one of the biggest hoaxes in history? Let's welcome to the show Bart Sibrel. Hi Bart, thank you for joining us.
Hi Lee, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. So Bart, your book Moon Man was released in September 2021, I believe.
Yep, that's correct.
Great. Can you tell us what that book's about? The title fascinates me.
Yeah, it's called Moon Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list. That second title came by way of accidental microphone was left on one of the Apollo astronauts after I challenged them about the authenticity of their mission. And when I was kicked out of the guy's house, we accidentally left a wireless microphone on and the camera was still recording in the car. And so we heard the audio of them, him and his son, potentially talking about calling the CIA to have me assassinated. Wow. Which, wouldn't be necessary if they really went to the moon and I, some silly person who thinks otherwise, right? So
right, yeah.
That's where the name came from. Well, the book is about the moon landings and how, unfortunately, they were fraudulent. And I grew up like everybody else thinking they were real. And my father was in the Air Force, and I got a packet of pictures from the first moon mission, which I had up on my wall for 10 years, from the age of 4 to 14 before I questioned them. And then I saw a gentleman on television giving an interview who worked for the Apollo program who said that they were fake. And then I, went back, looked at the pictures and kind of planted a seed. Another 10 years after that, I'd become a filmmaker and was producing a film for the guy who produced the show I'd seen 10 years earlier with the man who claimed the moon missions were fake. And he put me in touch with him. And he suggested that I do a film about it as a filmmaker. And I studied it for about 6 months and realized that there was a possibility that the moon missions were fraudulent, and that if it was indeed the case, it could be dangerous looking into it. So I turned it down. And then about 5 years go by, I had another client who asked me to do them a favor if they got a script of mine to a producer in Hollywood. And I asked them what favor. They said, read the Bible. So I started reading the 1 year Bible on June 3rd, 1989, the day the man in China stood in front of the tanks with his grocery bags. And 5 years went by. I'd read the Bible 5 times. I wasn't a Christian. However, I did come to the conclusion that there is a God. Things don't make themselves. A bee and a flower can't meet each other and independently know that they're making something interdependent like that. And that there is a judgment for how we live our life. And that if they fake the moon mission, that's actually more significant than if they had actually gone. So I realized that if this were true, this is an important truth for mankind to know. And I figured I'm going to die anyway, and I might as well go out in a blaze of glory. So I changed my mind and decided to produce the film. After all, we were financed $1 million by a board member of an aerospace company that builds rockets for NASA, who knows that they're fake. And I had people in the military telling me it was fake. I had people at NASA telling me it was fake. And then about 3.5 years into the 7-year project, I pop in a tape and it says, don't show to the public on the screen. And it's unedited footage of fake photography from the first mission proving they didn't go. And then there's photographic evidence of shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart, when if sunlit, those shadows should always be parallel. So that proves electrical lighting. So that's proof. First of all, let's just see what they're attempting to do here. The sun is about 93 million miles away. So if you go out at noon on a sunny day, or you look at two objects, these two telephone poles are about, I don't know, 8 feet apart from one another, you see that the shadows never intersect. It's impossible for them to intersect because the sun is 93 million miles away. It has a diameter 1,000 times bigger than the Earth, and it's going to cast light evenly on any surface on the Earth. The shadows will fall in the same direction forever, all the time. And that's why when you look at pictures that were taken in a television studio, such as the moon landing pictures were, and here's an example, I believe this is from Apollo 14, you can see that you have an astronaut shadow going at 12 o'clock and a shadow of a rock over here going at about 9 o'clock. And they're only, about 5 feet apart from one another. So this is simply impossible to be taken by sunlight. You can even do a little side-by-side comparison here, and you'll see that this is simply impossible to have been taken with sunlight, which means it was taken with electrical light, which means it was taken in a television studio, which means they're on Earth, which means the moon landings are fake. And then we find out a gentleman came forward who was there while they filmed Apollo 11 at a particular military base in the United States on June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. He gave us the name of the base, the dates it was filmed, the official CIA code name for the project, and a list of 15 eyewitnesses who were there at the time. And he was chief of security, military police officer at that base, and confessed this on his deathbed. So we have video evidence, photographic evidence, and firsthand eyewitness testimony. And then you simply have logic. If today, with 50 years better technology, the farthest NASA can send an astronaut is only 1,000th the distance to the moon. So what they're claiming is 50 years ago, on the first attempt, with 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone, they went 1,000 times farther in 1969 than they can go today with 5 decades better technology. So seeing how it's impossible for technology to go backwards, you can prove deductively they didn't go to the moon. Yeah. And then they destroyed all the evidence, the videotapes, the schematics, the electrical diagrams, the telemetry tapes of where the rocket really was. All that they intentionally destroyed, which if you really went to the moon and spent an equivalent of $200 billion to do it, I don't think you throw away that technology, too valuable. However, if you committed a fraud, you would destroy everything. And so the fact that they destroyed everything is actually proof of the fraud, because if you really went, you wouldn't do it. And if you perpetrated a fraud, you would destroy it. So that itself proves the fraud. And then, it just goes on and on. And a third of the book is about how and why, like I said, they didn't go. Another third is kind of my espionage adventures, including at one point being kidnapped and drugged by the CIA, escaping their custody, taking my urine sample through another person to a lab. The lab was broken into over the weekend, and the only thing stolen was my urine sample, because I was going to prove I'd been drugged by this truth serum, that only the government could get. And I was going to, hey, I got them, but then they broke into the lab, to steal it. It's pretty remarkable. And then the last third is about how, look, the people who killed Kennedy, faked the Gulf of Tonkin, 9/11, the moon landing, these people are at large and they're operating the show right now. So that's an alarming situation to be in. I don't really talk about directly this little adventure we've been having for 2 years. However, I suggest that perhaps that's not the most genuine thing about what's going on either, seeing how the people who run the country are liars and have been well established at that. And how pathetic is it to now be a part of a country whose greatest accomplishment is a fraud, and whose heroes that they held ticker tape parades for are liars. So our heroes are liars. That's quite a country we have become. So if anyone thinks that's inappropriate and maybe something should be corrected about that, maybe that would be the case. And then you have William Benny, who was a NSA employee in upper management for 30 years. He goes on national TV and says, oh, by the way, I witnessed the NSA spying on presidents, congressmen, senators, and Supreme Court justices' phone calls for the purpose of getting dirt on them to blackmail them to vote a particular way. Says it as a fact. No one contradicts them on national TV, not a single investigation. Remarkable. Someone leaks out that Clinton's, cheating Sanders in the primary, then the FBI attacks the guy, who just received the information or leaked it. Who knows what was going on. But you have an acknowledgement that the NSA is blackmailing Supreme Court justices, not a single investigation. Isn't that odd?
That goes to show how much dirt they have and how far it goes, because nobody wants to touch them.
Well, I think someone touched one of them. Who's the Chief Supreme Court, Roberts? Remember how he had that Band-Aid on his nose about a year ago? Remember that? I think he sassed somebody back about obeying commandments, and I think they slapped him around or something. Well, maybe then reading too much into it, but it kind of looks like that could have been what happened there.
Wow.
So,
Wouldn't surprise me.
Wow. What a life you lead.
well, I'm trying
a
to
dull moment.
well, the book, which you'd go to Sibrel.com, it's interactive. There are 15 video links. So I basically give an introduction, say, stop, watch this video, watch a funny thing happen on the way to the moon first. Then you'll know what I'm talking about. Stop and watch this clip and this clip and this clip from NASA admitting, indirectly the fraud.
Well, here's what this guy had to say about the Orion Project. Kelly Smith, who inadvertently admitted they did not go to the moon back in the 1960s.
We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth, 15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this can harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation.
But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation.
Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. For this flight...
Okay, I think that's enough right there. I appreciate this person on this channel who kind of, slowed that down here. In fact, we can take a look at the graphic here again. What they said is we must solve these challenges of radiation before we send people through this region of space, which means the technology to survive going through the Van Allen radiation belts has yet to be invented.
And documentation is all in there as well. And it is what it is. They did fake the moon landing. And I guess until the truth comes out, number one, our country will be run by gangsters. And then number two, if we keep painting over mold and not acknowledging this mistake, then I think it's just going to become poisonous. So you have to admit it for the country to do better.
Yeah.
Now, do you believe that the whole Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley, the Groom Lake, Babylon working with L. Ron Hubbard, do you believe that had a big impact on NASA?
Well, I don't study that a whole lot, the Illuminati or whatever. It seems to be genuine. There's a lot of people who acknowledge that it's the case. Apparently, all the astronauts were Masons or whatever you want to call them. As far as, what their writings are, that their plans for the future, I think they published them, their plans for the future 150 years ago, and it looks like they're on track to do what they're doing. Yeah. If you could interpret Jesus's remarks, I think it's Matthew 24, that there will be greater tribulation in the last days than at any other time in world history. And if God doesn't intervene, no one will be saved. So I take that to mean that at the very end, God will intervene. They did a fabulous job, killed Kennedy in front of 200 eyewitnesses. They said they're going to release the documents, and then they pass a law that's so stupid. It says, we'll, release them on this date unless we change our mind. It literally says that, unless the current president at that time decides not to. So it's like, I promise not to slap you unless I decide to. Yeah. It's like, why even bother writing such a law? They can't even release that. Yeah. It's preposterous. The dead man's nephew, Bobby Kennedy Jr., says 100% certainty the CIA killed him. So that's, the CIA is supposed to protect the president, and they're killing him instead. That's a point of no return, it looks like, right there. Oddly enough, there's going to be an eclipse right over that point of no return. Dallas, I think April 8th, 2024, 7 years earlier, there was one over Nashville that has the tallest pagan sculpture.
They shot him in a Masonic, that was like a Masonic monument, that square that they killed him in.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I mean, we know, 75% of Americans say Oswald did not kill Kennedy. 75%. 50% question the 9/11 story, and 25% believe the most outrageous thing, which is that the moon landings were shot on Earth, which they were. That's a lot of people, who are starting to wake up. So I suspect they're going to cause a cyber attack so that the only thing that works is broadcast TV, which they have complete control over, unless the local stations accidentally report something, true.
Right. That could have something to do with why they forced everybody to switch out of analog to digital.
Well, actually, there is a reason for that. Interesting you bring that up. They made it mandatory for all TV and radio to be HD by January 1st, 2012. That's 10 years ago. And so I looked into it, and it has a built-in 10-second delay. Very interesting. When Richard Pryor was on Saturday Night Live, I think in 1978, they were afraid he'd say something inappropriate like he did on his stand-up comedy routine. And the show was live. So the guy's a professional. He's not going to curse on live TV. Nevertheless, they gave him a 5-second delay so that if he did, they could bleep it out. So now built into TV and radio is a 10-second delay, twice the time. So if somebody reports something truthful, they can zap it out, make it look like static before the public ever hears about it. It's really remarkable. And they demanded that they have that ability. They built it that way, right? So.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed with high definition television, there's a real lot of pixelation. Like, you see it all the time, like people's faces pixelate, where in the old days, you never got any of that.
I remember the first time I saw HD was David Letterman. Been watching him standard definition, that I got a TV HD, and the first thing I said was, wow, he's old. Anyway, you can see so much detail. It was like a control room monitor that I'd been working with in television. It was like a control room monitor quality there, in your living room. I was like, wow, maybe it isn't all that good. I mean, maybe you should tone it down a little bit, maybe it's not better. Wow.
So how hard was it for you to track these astronauts down? That had to have been just an amazing feat.
Well, I found actually Neil Armstrong on my own. Believe it or not, nobody knew where the guy lived.
Wow.
And he had mentioned that he lived in Wapakoneta or something. So as soon as there was like something like maybe a 25th or 35th anniversary. No, it must have been like the 20th anniversary. I think on the 20th anniversary, someone tracked him down, and because I had professional equipment, I freeze framed the farmhouse and I printed it out, and I found it and knocked on the door. There's an echo on the other side. As soon as someone found out where he lived, he vacated. There was no furniture, nothing in there. And so what I figured is I would track him down because he wouldn't register anything in his name. So I found out his wife's maiden name and went to property tax in the town that they lived in, just Cincinnati, kind of a rich neighborhood of Cincinnati. I'm pretty sure that's where it was. Anyway, and sure enough, I found the house. His neighbors don't even know that he lives next to them. The mailman doesn't even know who he's delivering mail to. I talked to the mailman. He said, yeah, a Neil Armstrong, not the Neil Armstrong. I'm like, oh, yeah, I think it is the. And then for the other ones, I got maybe half of them on my own, and the other half we hired a private detective to find. So.
Mr. Armstrong, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Gentlemen. Mr. Sibrel.
Yes? If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put the into the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Sibrel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Really? Well, no, it's a real Bible. You have the opportunity to have $5,000.
The meeting is not open.
Well, you have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Please
I have
give
the
it to
tape.
charity. It'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to? Why not? Why won't you do it? So why don't you put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Sibrel has made a fool of himself in front of the world. Mr. Sibrel, you do not deserve answers.
You really like it, don't you? You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself. Away from me. You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
Oh, interesting.
I guess, after the first film, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. I thought, hey, why not ask these people to just swear on the Bible, probably from a courtroom, TV show I saw as a kid. Of course, afterwards, people pointed out to me, another brother, Christian, the Bible says don't take an oath. So I was asking them to do something that's inappropriate. And what was it?
I thought about that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and then talking to an elder disrespectfully. It does say to correct an older person respectfully. And so calling him a liar, coward, and thief, that was disrespectful. I've been a liar, coward, and a thief anyway myself. And, didn't intend on saying that, just got kind of heated up. So I apologized. And the day that I did, we have a copy of him online. He purchased A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon.
Wow.
And was interested in seeing it. Of course, in part two, I showed him the fake footage in one instance with the TV monitor. And he said, oh, and this makes you famous for having discovered this. Well, how could I be famous if I'm wrong? So that's an admission. And then he said, well, we were just passengers. Talk to NASA. Okay, so that means he didn't pilot. He was supposed to be a lunar module pilot. So passengers just is orbiting the Earth for 8 days. So, and then when he realized he made 2 admissions, he threatened to sue us if we showed those admissions to anybody. Then, of course, another guy kicks me. Another guy, he ended up punching me later. One guy threatens to shoot me. And, all this crazy stuff happens. But what can you do? So the last link of the book, if you go to Sibrel.com, it's, top left, it says Moon Man video links, is kind of a song summarizing my little adventures making this. So it might be a good way to end the video. You could put it up there, and it's at Sibrel.com, link number 15. And, it kind of makes, one of the lyrics is, it kind of makes me uneasy to watch Astronauts Gone Wild. Like, oh, did anyone ever see that film with Robert De Niro, king of comedy. He plays this nerdy wannabe stand-up comedian who tracks down like the Johnny Carson of his day, to be on the show. And he ends up being kicked out of his office. He's like, well, he won't be back, until Monday. I'll wait. So security has to kick him out. And I'm like sweating in the movie theater watching it. I feel so, nervous for him being kicked out by being crazy anyway. So I kind of feel like that watching it, realizing how I really put him on the spot there. And I have I guess you'd call a friend, acquaintance. And he said the first film, even though we, know the footage proves that they didn't go, he said people are going to see it anyway they want to see it. They'll still think we went anyway. He said, but this one, you're making them mad because you're making their people look bad. So one day I'm sitting there, I think it's the 35th anniversary. I'm sitting in bed, it's 7 a.m, eating oatmeal or cereal, and there's Good Morning America or something like that on. And it's the 35th anniversary. And there are the 3 astronauts, Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, and Neil Armstrong, standing there with the White House behind them. They're on the lawn of the White House. And the interviewer's talking by satellite, and he says, hey, I'm glad I'm talking by satellite so that Buzz doesn't punch me. And he kind of looks ashamed down there. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, they're talking about me. And I'm rocking their boat.
Yeah.
The seat of authority, the White House, is behind them. And I'm the one they're talking about rocking their boat. And it dawns on me, maybe a little late, what I'm doing is dangerous. Just kind of, this wave of horror came over me. They're talking about me in the White House. So no.
Well, it's that old World War II fighter pilot saying, if you're catching flak, that means you're over the target. So.
Yeah, they say that, don't they?
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
what can you do? So, I hope to put the moon adventures behind me. I've always wanted to be a feature filmmaker. I've written a feature film. It was going to star Ed Asner, wanted to do it. He was a fan of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. I told him I had this film idea. I told him these two. One actually was a comedy about the second man to walk on the moon. It was going to be called Bob Went Second, about how the guy's always frustrated that he's introduced as the second man. There were shots from a security camera of him like on his psychiatrist's couch. We never say the moon landings are fake. We imply that they're real, but he's always like, the CIA is always around the corner hiding behind a newspaper or something. And the fact the film opens up with the TV picture, or was going to, we're ready for you to come down the ladder. Hey, Neil. Oh, Neil. Neil. Bob? Yeah. What's Neil's? Well, I don't know where he went off to. Well, it's kind of a small craft there, Bob. You got 1 billion people waiting. You want to be first? Well, I'll be glad to. So he comes down. That's one small step for man one. And he goes, oh, who cares? I did it. I'm first. And then we show a boot sticking up and him burying Neil Armstrong on the moon. It's his fantasy. So the guy's a super genius. He lives in Washington, D.C., and he's kind of breaking into the Smithsonian night after night for like 6 weeks. He's taking, part of the rocket and part of the propeller of, the Spirit of St. Louis, and part here building something in his barn. And at the end of the film, he holds a press conference and he pushes a button, the roof comes off, and he has built a rocket to go one way, can't even land, it's going to crash, Thelma and Louise into the moon. And he says, if I can't be first, then I'm going to be last. And he sets off, he does a suicide mission. So that was going to be Bob Went Second. And Ed Asner was going to play Bob, And, but then I told him this other idea called Silence in Heaven. I think it's Revelation 8:1. It says, when the 7th seal was opened, there was silence in heaven. I think because the judgment can't be taken back anymore. So it opens up with a dream. Now, we never say where it's from. It's actually from Ecclesiastes. it says, remember God before the silver cord is severed, and we show a rope kind of swinging and a knife coming through. Remember God before you return to the dust from where you came. So in the dream, we show maybe a tombstone with a crow on it and dust flying by. Remember God before the pitcher of water is broken at the well. We show a pitcher of water falling and shattering. And the alarm goes off. The father and son who haven't seen each other in 40 years, Ed Asner, and then actually Jim Caviezel said he wanted to play his son if he could work him in. So, but in any case, they hadn't seen each other in 40 years because the father was a military hitman killing traitors legally, barely, and had been court-martialed but was found not guilty. And one of the people he killed was his best friend, who was his wife's, husband of her best friend. They were best friends too. And so she refuses to talk to him again. And he says he's dying of heart cancer. And so we basically follow this guy as he's slowly changing, wanting to make amends in his life before he dies. All the while, these angels, seem to be popping around. And what happens is when they meet in the restaurant and the son reaches for the glass of water, it falls in slow motion toward the ground. And then we cut to the dream of the pitcher of water falling. The glass shatters, the pitcher shatters, and it reminds him of a dream. So as he tells him the dream about the pitcher of water, his father turns kind of white, like scared, and he says, I had that dream too. And of the pitcher of water falling. And he says, was there a crow in it? And he says, yeah, there was a crow on a tombstone. The waitress listening in, and she says, what's going on? And they explain they both had the same dream. It's kind of weird. And then she says, was there a rope being cut? And then she had the dream too. Then they talk to the table behind them. They had the dream also. The old man beats his cane on the table and stands up. How many people in the restaurant had this dream? And everyone raises their hand. So
Wow.
It's about this phenomenon that happens where everyone overnight has the same dream. And what does it mean? We have fake men on the street, giving their opinion. But what it really is, we never say. It's a warning that the world is about to end. And God is giving us a chance to repent. And then strange things start happening around the world. Tornadoes start striking more frequently, except they're only striking churches, mosques, and synagogues. The false churches, the false mosques, the false synagogues. God's kind of, rebuking them. And then there's a second dream, except only 10%, the tithe, receives the second dream, and they're not allowed to discuss it unless they also have had the second dream. So the son picks up that the father has had it. He's winking at the waitress who she's had the dream. She's winking back and wondering what's going on. And then they turn on the news again, and another phenomena starts happening. All the animals in Africa, they're eating grass now.
Yeah.
And of course, he tries to make amends with his wife, ex-wife, who has a cross around her neck, but she says, I'll never forgive you. I hope you burn in hell. So I wanted to represent false Christianity. And then all these strange coincidences keep, happening to him and to everybody else. And toward the end, the coincidence is as he's dying, he sees a woman being wheeled into the room next to him. And that's the widow of his best friend who had killed 40 years earlier. That she's dying, and fate, God has brought them side by side. And he finally asks for her forgiveness, and she gives it, true Christianity. Then there's an earthquake. The son is watching from the door, and as he goes outside at night, there's a bright light coming down from the sky, and that's the end, representing the second coming.
Wow.
So the guy basically repents just in time.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. What a great storyline. That sounds fascinating.
So hopefully, I need $1 million. We just need 1 million people to pledge $1.
Yeah. Wow.
Actually, it's funny you say that, Bart, when my mum was passing away, she was in an aged care facility, and you were just mentioning about a silver cord being severed. I was sitting there with my sister and brother-in-law, and I don't know, take it or leave it, but I saw coming out of my mother's stomach or her chest, it was probably an inch wide by probably a foot, a foot long, 12 inches long. These silver things come out of her chest. There was 3 of them. 2 were the same length and one was a little bit smaller. And there was a silver, like a bit like a chrome exhaust pipe on a motorbike, if you can imagine, really, really silver. And they come up and they sat there for about 5 or 10 seconds and then just went and took off. And I swear it happened, mate. And you just brought me back to that moment when you said about the silver cord severing. I believe I watched that with my mother. She passed on about 24 hours later the next day, but I don't know how to explain it.
I think what Ecclesiastes is saying is remember God before the silver cord is severed. Before you die, turn to God. Yeah. And so that's what all the warnings in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 are saying. Remember God before you return to the dust from which you came.
Yeah.
And so we know in Ezekiel, he says, if a righteous man is righteous, but turns wicked at the end, even though his whole life had been righteous previously, only his wickedness will be remembered. And then the good news is it also says if a man is unrighteous his whole life, like our main character in the film, and at the end turns to God, his lifetime of wickedness will be forgotten and only his last righteousness will be remembered.
Yes, it's like the vineyard, the story, the parable of the vineyard, where the vineyard owner is paying people throughout the day, but he pays them all the same amount.
Yes.
And they all complained because, the guys that were working at the beginning of the day are getting paid the same amount as the guy working only an hour when they worked all day. And it's basically saying, hey, as long as you give yourself over, doesn't matter if it's on your deathbed.
Sooner is better.
Yes, but you can't go by your works. Your work, lest any man boast.
But I have a question. When you came to understanding that this was a deception, did that open up all the other deceptions going on in the world for you to explore?
Well, no, I mean, I didn't intentionally set out to uncover other riddles. It's just one of those things, one thing leads to another. And I guess it's becoming just knowing to look for such things before and maybe not being oblivious to it beforehand. So now when I know that the government is bold enough to lie about the moon landings, kill their own president, do something with 9/11, and so he may want to question whatever the government says. Right. Every TV station, every radio station had men on the moon, just like every TV station and every radio station had, the event for the last 2 years, as if that's what's going on.
Yeah.
So just because it's in every media, doesn't mean it's true. It could be in them all and be completely wrong. So
yeah, and you've got that very interesting video on your Sibrel.com where it's about the media, how they just keep repeating all over the world the same lines, and you've put together a video of that, and that's really interesting. Do you know the one I mean? I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, they're using the same script in the TV stations. If you see in the lower left and right corner are Fox, ABC, NBC, and CBS. They're all using the same script word for word. So
yeah,
it is what it is. That that's what the central intelligence is information, central information, right?
Yes, Project Mockingbird. That's what was it? Spangler, was that his name? The director. He was saying once the American people believe everything that they see off the television, we'll know our disinformation. What is it? Yeah, the Project Mockingbird. They'll know that it's complete because everything that they're telling us is just complete garbage.
Yeah, well, that's why they call it programming, right, Cory?
Right.
Programming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell
We
live
watch
vision.
it on the we watch it on the Tell Live Vision.
Yeah. Or tell vision. Yeah.
Tell Live Vision, and we
I
are
had someone
programmed.
say they know the moon landings are real because they saw it on television. One person told me that. Another person said they know they're real because they were there.
Oh.
And I said, "You were there?" They said, "Yeah, I was watching on TV. I was there."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah, there's so many anomalies in there, you know, like when you really sit down and start thinking about it and deciphering what you're watching and thinking, well, hang on a minute, that don't look right and that ain't right. And like I often look at the moon landings and all the pictures on the moon and on the way to the moon, and you never ever see stars. There's never stars. And I would have thought on the moon it would be just this giant panorama of the Milky Way and stars and potentially planets in the distance, and you don't see it.
Achievement. But their faces appear somber, tense, somehow preoccupied instead. They seem uncomfortable, and there are several truly embarrassing moments during the event. When the three astronauts are asked the meaning of a mission that has brought mankind on another celestial body for the first time, the three don't seem too eager nor too enthusiastic about answering the question.
Many of us and many other people in many places have speculated on the meaning of this first landing on another body in space. Would each of you give us your estimate of what is the meaning of this to all of us?
And when Armstrong describes their achievement as the beginning of a new era, he seems more like a person forced to read from a script than someone actually convinced of his own words.
The entire program, it's a beginning of a new age.
Possibly the most embarrassing moment of all comes when the famous astronomer and journalist Sir Patrick Moore asks the astronauts whether they could see stars from the moon.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
But not one of them, surprisingly, remembers having seen a single star by the naked eye.
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics.
Even Collins, who was left orbiting the moon while the other two descended on the surface, does not remember seeing a single star.
I don't remember seeing any.
Yeah, they couldn't fake all that stuff, so they just acted like it didn't show up on the film. There's a picture from, I don't know, a few years ago, 10, 15, last space shuttle sitting there, I think, at dawn or dusk, and you can see the stars in the background. So they could have exposed, a part of the sky, overexposed it so that it would show up, but they never took any pictures of the stars when they could have easily, because they couldn't fake the astrological positions of the constellations.
Right.
So,
I would have brought a telescope. If I was on the moon, I would have had the strongest telescope possible.
yeah, they should have left one, radio controlled and all that, but they didn't. That couldn't be fake. So.
Well, then they said that they left mirrors and the coordinates for the mirrors, and that you could, find the coordinates, aim your laser at it, and it would bounce back. But then they said that they could do that before they made those statements. I don't know what to believe. They said,
well, yes, I think it's Scientific American. Late 1950s said they were bouncing lasers off the moon in the 1950s, so that because of the reflective surface. So all they had to do is claim, their landing site, pick a reflective area of the moon as the landing site.
Yeah, Tesla believed it was plasma. He believed the sun and moon were a positive and a negative plasma.
I don't know, it has craters, so it's got to be tangible.
Yeah. Yeah, something's been smacking it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting is about the Van Allen's belt. Surely if they were that close to it, there's going to be some kind of effects that were felt, but there's never any mention of that. in their interviews, I've noticed.
Yeah, one of the clips at Sibrel.com, we have a NASA employee admitting that the radiation belts that most people don't know about, they're about 1,000 miles above the Earth and extend up to 30,000 miles. That the only time humans are said to have gone through it would be to the moon and back. They'd have to go through it. So this employee says that they're deadly, and then he says the technology for an astronaut to survive going through the radiation belts has yet to be invented.
Right, yes.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
so if it's yet to be invented to survive, then how did they go to the moon exactly without dying?
Exactly.
So they inadvertently admitted that they were fake. I called up NASA and said, hey, let me talk to this guy. He's pretty sharp. And they said, oh, he doesn't give interviews anymore. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you sent up a probe. I think it was in 2014, they sent up a probe to measure the radioactivity. I think they sent up 2 Geiger counters. And so I said, may I please have those Geiger counter readings? And they said, no, you may not, because it's a classified secret. I said, really? I mean, that's like making the temperature of
money.
Yeah, it's like it's the temperature of the sun a classified secret. Is the amount of hydrogen in Jupiter's atmosphere, is that a classified secret? No, they're just a part of nature. So how much radiation is surrounding the Earth? It's just a part of nature. Why would it be classified unless it would prove that they're deadly and therefore they couldn't go through them to go to the moon, which is exactly why they're classified. So what can you do?
They keep shooting themselves in the foot like constantly. And
yeah, and then there's a couple of spatial astronauts saying that they hope to eventually go to the moon.
I've seen that. Yeah,
and it's always weird. I mean, George Bush said they had to go to the moon a 7th time to practice to go to Mars, and I'm thinking, okay, so you've done something 6 times, and you need to practice again before you go to Mars. I mean, people don't realize it was 10 years after Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic. There were thousands of aircraft flying across the Atlantic, probably 100 times more complicated. And 10 years after the atomic bomb, it was 1,000 times more powerful 10 years later. So if they could go to the moon on the first attempt with 1/millionth the computing power of a cell phone, they would have been on Mars 10 years later, and we'd be in another solar system by now. And there'd be bases all over the moon. So that's Elon Musk to land a rocket vertically just a few years ago with 6 supercomputers, 1 for each rocket on each side of the, 1 for each engine on each side of the rocket. Each engine had its own supercomputer, synchronizing the thing so it wouldn't fall over so that it could land vertically. It blew up the first 5 times they tried to do that with 5 decades better computer technology. It still took 6 attempts to land a rocket vertically. So how could they land a rocket vertically the first time and every time with 1/millionth the computing power?
Yeah, and then we have an astronaut telling us that they can't go back to the moon because they destroyed all that technology. Like, why would you want to use 60s technology to go there now when we have much better technology?
Well, I mean, if it worked, it worked. I think it's called B-52 is 70 years old since it was designed. 70.
And yeah, that was the V2.
The B-52.
Okay.
The B-52 bomber was built, the first one, 70 years ago. And there's still 200 of them in service. 200 of them in service.
I thought you were talking about Von Braun's B2.
No, the B-52 is still in service. The point is it's 70 years old. The moon equipment, only 50. So they're not going to destroy that equipment. It works. They're still using it. So if they really went to the moon on the first attempt, he would hold on to that equipment. But they did the exact opposite. They burned it all up.
Yes,
right.
Which they would never do unless they're covering their tracks about something. So.
Yeah, one of the things I often wondered about, when the lunar module took off from the moon, like the big thing was it wasn't covered in dust, which you'd think, with a rocket engine coming down and landing on the moon with all the dust, everything would be covered in dust, but there was no dust. It was crystal clear. But the big thing, when the lunar module took off, the camera actually pans up with it. And I thought, How'd they do that? Was there someone
Well, they
left on
allegedly
the moon?
they allegedly guessed on the time, on the time delay. They allegedly guessed on it, but I don't think you could do that good of a guess on the first try. The other reason is, there was, when the thing landed, even right now, Elon Musk's rocket for the moon, all the depictions of it show a huge crater. In fact, that's a problem they haven't solved yet. Having the rocket not fall into the crater the engine creates as it descends. They haven't solved that problem.
Right.
So why is it the lunar module and all the pictures, at least they figured out on Apollo 12, they made a mistake. So they have it rolling behind a hill. So when you see Apollo 12 lunar module, the bottom of it is behind a rolling hill. And then repeat it and go. And then, but there's never actually a crater of any kind there. The thing was just, placed there. There's even, I think it was depictions, Norman Rockwell depictions show a huge crater as the thing is landing. So that's what they expected. And that's what Elon Musk is expecting. But for some reason, it didn't happen when they went to the moon. What can you do?
Yeah. Wow. The other thing that I've noticed that I've often wondered about was Neil Armstrong. They've got supposedly his flight suit, in the museum in America there, and it's got different treads, like the tread marks on the moon are different to his boots. They were saying that he actually had galoshes on, that they put these galoshes on the bottoms of the boots. And I was thinking,
that's the case. There was the suit that had kind of, it looked to me like a sole of a dress shoe. And then basically these rubber, it looks like sandals with the cleats on them, went on the outside, and that's why they're different. The question is, though, seeing how the moon is bone dry, if you've ever seen a footprint in the desert where it's bone dry of your foot in sand, there is no detailed impression. It's just a big concave. The only way you can have a detailed impression like it shows in the Apollo picture of the first footprint on the moon is if there's a dramatic amount of moisture in the soil, which there has to be for the print to be indentated like that. It has to have a lot of moisture in there.
That to hold that shape.
That's right. And again, if you, in the book, I show this, the picture of a footprint in the dry desert. It's just kind of like an oval. That's all you see. So that's the way sand should be from a footprint where there's no moisture. So they made a mistake there.
Apparently the moon is a third the size of the Earth. So when they're on the moon looking back at the Earth should have been massive in the sky, like really big, I believe it. And yet it's sort of similar to the size of the moon in relation.
Yeah, and it's only actually in one picture over the shoulder of an astronaut, I think from Apollo 17, when according to calculations, it should have been pretty much right at the horizon all the time on every mission. And so if you're going to pose with the Eiffel Tower behind you, I think you probably pose with the Earth. Of course, then they would have to fake the cloud cover, which would have to match satellite pictures. Then they would have to do the continents, and they'd have to do light and dark and turning. It seems like it'd be pretty hard to do with that technology back then. So they only showed it one time. I mean, it's pretty odd, isn't it? Would have been quite a sight.
Yeah.
And then the idea that they would drive a car, away from their only life support system, because if the car broke down, they'd run out of oxygen walking back. The idea that they would drive a car far away, is ridiculous. I always say if they were going to do Apollo 18, I think they're going to have a basketball team to really show off, But
well, again, it's like the lunar module, it's sat on the side of the, the craft that landed. Well, did they show any shots of it come off? Because I don't know. Is there any shots of them lowering it down and like it just sat on the side of it? Now that'd have to weigh a fair bit. Admittedly, I suppose in zero gravity, it'd weigh nothing.
Well, it's supposed to be 1/6 gravity.
Okay.
Yeah. But in any case, I mean, the whole thing is kind of odd. I think they charged in today's dollars $100 million for the moon rovers, even though they had fewer parts than a Jeep. Of course, Cheney's commission is 93%. So
it was like 60 million for each one for two of them. So And it was ridiculous. It looked like lawn chairs on a chassis, you know, like a Jeep that had just been tore down to just the chassis. And they threw some lawn chairs on there and said, there you go. I don't know where $60 million went. I honestly don't.
Well, I said Cheney, his commission is 93%. So
there you go.
Whoa.
That's where it went.
That's that overhead there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Unreal. Because I've also heard a rumor, well, a theory that it was like a little remote control buggy turning across a bit of, you know, little sand dunes and things, and they, I don't know, they slowed it down or sped it up. Because when you look at the astronauts sitting in the you know, in the vehicle, it just doesn't look right. They're sitting really rigid. I don't know.
Yeah, someone analyzed that. Actual film motion picture cinematographer did a comparison of a model and apparently proved it mathematically that you're correct, that it, for one shot or driving around, they used a model maybe about this big of a moon buggy with little dolls in it or something. He proved mathematically that it was a miniature. So
okay, there you go. Yeah, because it just doesn't look
pretty
right.
advanced, you know. Pretty advanced.
You know. The other thing, I was just talking to Cory and Lee before you come on, Bart, and I was just, to be honest, I don't know how long they went, you know, how long it was, you know, 7 days, 10 days or whatever to go up and back. I don't remember. But we've all got to go to the toilet. So where did that all go? Like, you don't see any big zips in the back of the flight.
That's where Cheney comes in handy again. He has the porta potty franchise on the moon, and you'd be surprised. I know there's nobody there, but there are like, I think there's 400,000 porta potties on the moon. He gets, I think, $8 million for each one, so he's made pretty good money on that one. And of course, the first one was at the Apollo 11 landing site, and he also has the contract for cleaning them, service them twice a month.
Nice.
Oh, I love it.
Dusting off the micrometeorites, you know, keeping them clean.
Oh dear. And yeah, well, that was the other thing, you know, they talk about the, what do you call them, the miniature meteors. They could penetrate a suit, a bit like getting hit by a bullet. Now, I must admit, they probably don't fly through the atmosphere, or not the atmosphere, but through space all that often, but
no, actually they do. We found a publication from von Braun that said you'd have to, as soon as you land on the moon, you'd have to immediately go into a cave because of a 50% chance every 24 hours of a catastrophic failure from explosive decompression from a micrometeorite traveling at approximately 25,000 miles an hour. Dust, sand is constantly hitting like a sandstorm the moon nonstop, millions of them probably a day. So one would eventually, he says it would happen every 24 hours, 50% chance. So within a day, you'd be hit by one and it would kill you, you know, basically ruin the spacecraft, ruin the spacesuit. You wouldn't be able to get off there. You'd be stuck, or you could go into a cave, which they never did. We also have a publication saying that to reach the moon nonstop in a single rocket means that it would have to have so much fuel that it would weigh 800,000 tons. He says the mathematical figures speak for themselves, meaning they're irrefutable. The Saturn V weighed 2,500 tons instead of 800,000 tons, a difference of 30,000%. Maybe that's why they got rid of the schematics and everything, you see. Because then you could prove that you can't power air conditioning for 3 days on a bunch of car batteries down from 250 degrees Fahrenheit down to what they claimed was 72. I mean, they're so arrogant. They should have at least said it's 110 in here, we're sweating, you know, add a little realism. But they said, no, got it down to 72 degrees against 250 degrees on a bunch of car batteries, you know, nonstop, no engine running. Boy, there's some batteries, you know, and some air conditioning. I go out of my town car in the desert at 110 degrees instead of 250, turn on the air conditioner, running an RV battery. I think it might last a half an hour, possibly. Yeah. And but it's not going to get it. It's not going to get it down to 72. But yeah,
that's amazing.
Magical equipment. The same guy who made Oswald's bullet, he made all the Apollo equipment too. Same guy.
It's all magic.
That's right.
Oh, dear.
Wow, this has been an extraordinary time. I've even learnt so much just listening to you, and I think it's been eye-opening to say the least. And I really thank you so much for coming on, Bart.
Surely.
And also Cory and Mick for your input too. Thank you. And just once again, the book is called Moon Man, and you can also head over to Bart's website, which is called Sibrel.com, and he's got all sorts of information there, videos, links, books, his book and his work that he does, and I recommend that you check it out. So Bart, thank you for coming on the show. Good luck in your future. All the best.
Thank you.
And God bless you. And God
thank you.
bless
Likewise.
You. Thank you.
Take care, Cory. Mick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bart.
Yeah, thank you.
Used to be would loose my chain, set me free. I grew up dreaming to tell my stories of fancy tales of angelic glory. Instead, my train derailed my truth by dear old grandma, old Ruth. She said the truth was worth to die, to beat old Satan, to beat his lies. I left my dreams to fight for truth, and dear old grandma, old Ruth. A funny thing, my first big film, loved and hated like the heat of a kiln. Hero to some, others wish dead. Hard success, hard head. Astronauts wild, I never flinched. My armor was the truth I pinched. Nervous now that I was groovy. Sweaty palms just watching that movie. I grew up dreaming to tell my stories of fancy tales of angelic glory. Instead, my train derailed my truth by dear old grandma, old Ruth. She said the truth was worth to die, to beat old Satan, to beat his lies. I left my dreams to fight for truth, and dear old grandma, old Ruth. And cursed, punched in the face, for facing this life of the human race. Some say patriot, some say traitor. Guess it depends on historical speculators. Astronaut sons of the CIA to take my life far away. Instead the curse fell on his head at 26. He's stone cold dead. I grew up dreaming to tell my stories of fancy tales of angelic glory. Instead, my train derailed my truth by dear old grandma, old Ruth. She said the truth was worth to die, to beat old Satan, to beat his lies. I left my dreams to fight for truth, and dear old grandma,